Picture this. You're strolling through a chaotic English marketplace in the 18th or 19th century. Fresh bread wafts through the air. Livestock groans under muddy wheels. Merchants shout over each other in a cacophony of survival. It feels alive, familiar, ordinary, but then everything stops. Amid the noise and movement stands a woman, still, silent. A ribbon tight around her neck, not for beauty, but for display. Her hand isn't held by a husband in affection, but by a man preparing to let her go. Because this woman isn't here to buy. Despite how shocking it sounds today, this practice did not begin as a legal process or an act of cruelty, but as a response to the limits and costs of formal separation. At a time when women had very few rights, and when marriage meant a complete legal transfer of property and autonomy to the husband, ending a relationship was often far more complicated than entering one. For most couples, divorce was an unreachable dream. The process was expensive, legally complex, and socially damning. It required either a private act of parliament, a church separation without the right to remarry, or long, costly legal battles. All of these were far beyond the reach of the average working man or woman. In many cases, one or both partners simply wanted to part ways. But without a legal route, wife-selling became an unusual but public alternative. The earliest known case was recorded in 1692, when a man named John Whitehouse sold his wife to another man, Mr. Bracegirdle. No details were kept on how the sale was conducted, but it marked the beginning of a social custom that would quietly continue for over 2 centuries. Though never officially legal, it operated in a strange space of tolerated illegality, understood more as a ritual than a true transaction. The process followed a certain formality. Notices were sometimes posted in town, alerting locals to an upcoming sale. On the day of the event, the woman would be dressed and led through town, usually wearing a halter or ribbon around her neck, or waist symbolic rather than restrictive. She was brought to a public space, such as a market square, a tavern yard, or even the steps of a courthouse. There, she was tied to a post and offered for sale. The highest bidder, often her new lover, would take her away. What might sound like a cruel display was, in some cases, a mutual agreement between the couple. Many of these sales were not forced or violent. They were arrangements that allowed both parties to move on with their lives in a society that offered few alternatives. Some women insisted on choosing the purchaser and, in rare cases, refused the man who offered the highest bid. There were even instances when the wife was already living with the buyer before the sale took place. In one sale in 1824, the woman did not approve of the first winning bidder and requested to be auctioned again. A lower bid was accepted along with a quart of liras, long as it came from someone she liked. This reveals the strange blend of performance and practicality in these transactions. Not every woman was a passive participant. Some were fully aware, fully consenting, and, in a few cases, the instigator. These public sales served a deeper function than many might assume. In a society driven by appearances and reputation, staging a sale was a public declaration. The marriage was over, the relationship was done, and any future dealings, especially debts or support, were no longer the original husband's concern. By leading the woman with a ribbon or halter, both parties signaled to the community that their legal and social connection had ended. Some examples of wife-selling were surprisingly structured. In January 1815, a man named John Osborne sold his wife and child for £1 inside a tavern because there was no market that day. That same year, a woman was brought to Smithfield Market and sold for 50 guineas and a horse. She departed with her new partner in a carriage with no sign of hesitation. These events drew crowds not only for their rarity but for the sheer spectacle. In one case, a sale had to be postponed because the gathering was so large it disrupted the marketplace. While many sales appeared civil and even cooperative, others were fueled by jealousy or frustration. In 1804, a London shopkeeper discovered his wife with another man. The confrontation did not end in violence. Instead, the man offered to buy her, and the shopkeeper agreed. It was settled there and then, not through drawn-out court battles or scandalous gossip, but as a swift, final transaction. Yet not all women agreed to the arrangement. In 1766, a carpenter in Swook sold his wife during a drunken fit at an alehouse. There is no record of her consent. The following day, he regretted the decision and pleaded for her to return. She refused. Overwhelmed by shame and grief, he later took his own life. This darker side of the tradition reminds us that behind the public displays were real people with real emotions and consequences. Though unofficial, wife sales were often treated as legitimate ends to a marriage, especially by local communities. Former husbands would publicly declare their disassociation from their wives. In Ipswich, one man posted an advertisement in 1789 warning the public not to extend his wife any credit under his name, stating she was no longer his responsibility. These declarations weren't legally binding, but they were socially understood. Inns and public houses became frequent venues. In Sussex, they were known hotspots. Payments were often made not only in coins but in drink. In 1898, a wife was sold for 7 shillings and a quart of beer. Earlier, in Brighton, another man accepted 8 pots of beer. In 1790, a man exchanged his wife for half a pint of gin only to change his mind later and buy her back. Despite its occasional acceptance, many people found the practice appalling. In 1797, a journalist from the Times witnessed a sale and called it a disgraceful act of the lower classes. Judges and authorities began to express public concern. In one 1,806 case, police had to protect the husband from an angry crowd who were outraged at his attempt to sell his wife. Though the practice lingered, social opinion began to turn. By the 1830s, the frequency of wife sales began to decline. The growing awareness of women's rights, along with the development of family law, started to change public attitudes. In 1857, the Matrimonial Causes Act made divorce more accessible to the middle class. Finally, there was a legally recognized way to dissolve a marriage without turning to markets or taverns. Still, the ritual persisted quietly in rural areas. The final known wife sale in England was reported in 1913, when a woman testified in court that her husband had sold her to one of his co-workers for a single £1. It was not a theatrical marketplace event, just a whispered deal, a relic of a disappearing tradition. The history of wife selling might seem strange today, even absurd, but within it lies a revealing truth about class, gender, and desperation in the Victorian world. For those trapped by poverty, social expectation, or an unreachable legal system, this public performance offered something that courts and institutions could not: closure, independence, and a strange form of dignity. Beneath the ribbons and beer mugs, these were stories of people trying, in their own unusual way, to reclaim control in a society that offered them few choices.